What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to be giving you guys a double header. Now, don't expect this from me any other time. It's just a one-time thing here. But I thought it would be fun. Also, these two videos kind of go together. So right now, I'm uploading my top 10 most disappointing teams of 2020-2021. Later today, you are going to see my top 10 most surprising teams of 2020-2021. I had a lot of fun making these videos and just seeing the way teams. It was quite an adventure to make. Before we get into the list, hey, like the video, hit that subscribe button. We recently just reached 100 subscribers, which is crazy. Thank you guys so much. My first 100 subscribers, I was blown away when I saw that number. In just under 9 months, or not even 9 months, I think it was about just under 8 months too, which is absolutely crazy. So thank you guys. Keep hitting that subscribe button. Also hit the bell so you can join Tailgate Nation. You'll know when I upload. And hey, share the video with everyone you know as well. Trying to grow the channel as big as possible, so it would mean a lot if you could share the video with everyone you know who likes college football as much as you and me. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into the list. Actually, I lied. Before we get into the list, here are some top 6 honorable mentions. I'm going to go through them really quickly. Virginia Tech, the offense just wasn't there. The defense had flashes of being solid, and Caleb Farley is sure to be a top or first-round pick in the upcoming NFL draft, but just couldn't get a whole lot going on offense. It really struggled. California and Arizona State are on here because the Pac-12 season, well, we didn't really get to see a whole lot from them, but what was expected of them, they didn't really move up to the standards. So a couple Pac-12 teams on there. Wisconsin and Minnesota, after the years they had 2 years ago now, right? It's weird saying that. After the years they had a couple years ago, both of them fell off. Minnesota more than Wisconsin, both of them still fell off. And Auburn, Bo Nix took steps back. Gus Malzahn didn't seem like the coach that he was. And Auburn just couldn't really get a whole lot going this year. So there are the honorable mentions. Now let's get into the top 10. The 10th most disappointing team this year, for me at least, remember this is my opinion, were the Oregon Ducks. They went 4-3, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you their win-loss record, of course, points per game, opponent points per game, yards per game, opponent yards per game, and then I'll give you 3 reasons why I think it was a disappointment for the certain team. So Oregon comes in at number 10 here. You can look at their stats. I'm not going to read those off every slide, but let's just go ahead and get into the 3 reasons they did not contend, or they didn't contend competitively in the Pac-12. Sure, they had flashes and they beat a very good USC team in the Pac-12 championship, but they weren't as good of a team as people expected them to be. For instance, Tyler Show, that's my next point. I'll talk about it later. But when you talk about overall games, when you look, Oregon State, a game they should have won, they lost that one. Hey, upset, get back to it next week. Well, next week, Cal, I believe that was Cal's only win of the season too, was beating Oregon. So just they didn't beat teams they should have beat, and I think that's a big reason why. But also getting back to the roster, I mentioned Tyler Shuck, guys like CJ Verdell also come on. Their talented roster just looked meh. It was, and I'm not saying stats or anything, and it's hard to compare 6-game stats with 11 or 12-game stats from across conferences this year, but that's going to be thrown out the window for me. It didn't matter, but talented roster just didn't look good. It had flashes, of course, but overall wasn't really the best. And also, I didn't really have a third reason for Oregon, but maybe their talent, or that's the second one, my bad. The Pac-12 season meant nothing, question mark. It seemed like no Pac-12 team had a shot of getting into the playoffs, so maybe Oregon fell back. I'm not really sure about that last one. Don't get at me too much for that one. I just didn't really have a good third point, but maybe, it's a possibility, right? But no, I don't really think that mattered a whole lot. I just had to put a third reason up on here, but Oregon, number 10. Number 9 is Mississippi State, and there's a lot of places that you can start with this team. Bringing in Mike Leach, bringing in KJ Costello. Well, we'll start with those two. KJ Costello did not live up to the hype, and I don't think it was a Mike Leach coaching issue. I just think it was KJ Costello could have played better and didn't. With the talent that KJ Costello has and the system that Mike Leach puts in place, It was a recipe for success at Mississippi State, and it just didn't work out. It was surprising to me when I saw KJ Costello throw for over 600 yards against LSU. That was insane. Never even got remotely close to that throughout the rest of the season. Just looked like another average quarterback. Even got replaced with the backup halfway through the season. So he became it was just a whole mess for KJ Costello. Hopefully Mississippi State can find a quarterback next year, but they've struggled at that position. Well, speaking of the rest of the offensive stars didn't show up. Kylan Hill, of course, had that whole debacle with the state flag. And just overall disappointment offensively for Mississippi State. Offensive line struggled. Wide receiver struggled. Tight end struggled. Running back struggled. It was a whole mess on this Mississippi State offense for sure. Their defense looked solid, as you can see by their numbers, but their offense couldn't score with opposing offenses. And to encapsulate the season, the brawl against Tulsa. Now, people need to be getting fined or suspended or whatever for that, because that was absolutely ridiculous. You don't kick a guy in the face when he's down. That was one of the most horrendous things I've ever seen in college football. That just encapsulates this disappointment of a season for Mississippi State. I don't need to say more. Mississippi State's at number 9. Number 8 is the Baylor Bears. Did you forget about the Baylor Bears? I know a couple of you watching this video did. They went 2-7 this year. Big reason why was Charlie Brewer took many steps back. Now, he played a very good 2019-2020 season. And last season, whatever you want to call it, 2020-2021, he had respectable stats, but they were nowhere near the stats he had last year. Or 2 years ago, I guess. Whatever. 2019-2020 stats through the roof. 2020-2021, pretty average stats. And it wasn't just the stats that diminished because I know less games and everything like that. It was his play. If you watch him play, he was making some not very smart throws. Was throwing a lot of interceptions because of those smart throws. Now, losing Mims hurts, I know, but Charlie Brewer did not sustain excellence. I don't know if a big part of that was because of coaching changes, but I do think that this 2-7, there were a lot of coaching changes for the Baylor Bears. And that's just the thing you got to deal with in sports is the coaching changes. But it seemed to affect Baylor a lot this year. For sure, they were missing Matt Rule and some of his just play calling abilities. Baylor can get back to be a solid team if they can figure out coaching situations, but coaching changes was a factor for Baylor. But they also didn't have a running game. They did not have a rusher with over 200 yards this season. I think the highest rusher had maybe 185, 195 yards. That was it. They had no running game. I thought Baylor was going to have one of the better running games in the Big 12. Nope, not a rusher with 200 yards. Baylor's at number 8. Number 7 is the Tennessee Volunteers, who just hired a new head coach. His name is escaping me right now, but firing Jeremy Pruitt. In Tennessee, another disappointing season. They went 3-7. They were expected to be good with the talent that they had, but Guarantano had a disappointing season. Jarrett Guarantano, I don't know what to think about the kid. I think he can be a good quarterback. He just never showed it. Had flashes, but never again sustained that run of excellence. And he had a very disappointing season. Again, even getting benched sometime through the season as well. So Jarrett Guarantano just did not play up to standards. Now, I know he was losing a lot of production at the wide receiver position and tight end position, but he's a good enough quarterback to where that shouldn't matter. Had disappointing season. Well, because they lost, they had no true number 1 pass catcher. Guarantano was trying to throw the ball everywhere, trying to go through his progressions, and he got sacked a lot. Guarantano got sacked a lot because he had no true number 1 progression. He did not have a true guy that you can trust in the late game scenario where you got to throw the ball down the field. Tennessee just didn't have it this year. And third down disasters, they were one of the worst teams in third down conversions and one of the worst teams in preventing a team from converting on third down. So one of the worst in the nation in third down offense and also one of the worst in the nation in third down defense. Offense was bad. Defense was bad. Tennessee, overall, disappointing season. They're at number 7. Number 8 is the Florida State Seminoles, another team that was supposed to be solid this year. They had good pieces. They had James Blackman. They had Tamorian Terry. They had some good pieces on defensive as well, but you see they're 3-6. Obviously, disappointment. We got to start with the bad quarterback play. James Blackman, a disappointment. And there was no true number 1 the way that all the quarterbacks played for Florida State this year. And James Blackman stands out as the guy that should have played great and was supposed to improve, but kind of fell off the face of the earth. So Florida State, that quarterback position is going to be something you focus on in the offseason and try to figure out. Now, they do have Chubba Purdy back there, who is Brock Purdy's brother, and if he can learn anything from his brother, should be a good quarterback, but we'll have to see who becomes the starter for Mike Norvell next year. And they couldn't score in the red zone. They were one of the worst teams in the nation in red zone percentage in terms of touchdowns and even field goals. They were turning the ball over in the red zone. They were getting careless with the ball. Just poor decision-making. Some good play calls from Mike Norvell, but some poor decision-making by his players. They could not punch it inside the 20-yard line. And to say the least, they had a very poor defense. You look at their stats, 36 points per game allowed, along with over 450 yards per game allowed. Inexcusable, not what you want from a football team at all. Florida State is going to sit here at number 6. Number 5 is another team from the ACC, the Louisville Cardinals. This was a pretty big surprise to me. I thought Louisville was going to be half decent. I thought they were going to be a solid team. I thought they were going to compete in the ACC. They had all the pieces to do so. Why not? Well, they had more turnovers than takeaways. Turnovers were a big problem for Louisville this year. I can't quite remember. I think they had a -12 or it was a big number in turnover takeaways. I think it was even in double digits that they had a minus turnover margin. But regardless, a lot of that is involved in Malik Cunningham throwing interceptions, the running backs and wide receivers fumbling. But there's just so many turnovers for Louisville, inexcusable. The O-line couldn't protect Malik Cunningham. You look there, points per game, pretty solid yards per game. They had one of the higher yards per game in the ACC. But Malik Cunningham got sacked too much. Malik Cunningham was sacked one of the most times in FBS this year. The offense, or I guess another way to phrase that is the offensive line gave up the most sacks, or some of the highest number of sacks out of any offensive line group in the nation this year. They were just bad. You could see they were missing Mekhi Becton from last year, and the defensive line was able to bully this offensive line. And Malik Cunningham wasn't super impressive. Like I just said, throwing interceptions, not a lot of touchdowns. Of course, he had Tutu Atwell out there and other guys as well. But just Cunningham wasn't it for Louisville this year. Had a disappointing season. If you're a Cardinals fan, you probably agree with me, right? This was a very disappointing season. They had some solid pieces, but overall just not a good showing for Louisville. There at number 5. The UCF Knights, Central Florida. What a story this team has been in previous years, and just I should mention now, talking about Florida State, I just remembered Mackenzie Milton is going to Florida State if he is healthy. So there's Florida State's quarterback possibly, but Chubba Purdy will fight for that. So you can tack that on Florida State, but it's segued into UCF because that's who Mackenzie Milton used to play for and was hoping to get back on the field. But Dylan Gabriel had it covered. Well, it was still a disappointment for UCF. They weren't contenders in the American Athletic. That is obvious. They put up a fight against they put up a great fight against some really solid teams. They just could not come out on the winning end. and they couldn't meet the high expectations. Look, the expectations for this team were very high. Very, very, very high. They had been one of the better teams in Group of Five the past 4 or 5 years. They just couldn't get it done this year. Not enough playmakers. And Obarski's kicking issues and meltdowns. There were a couple. He was one of the worst kickers, percentage-wise at least, in the nation this year. And missing the kick against Memphis and then melting down on the bench. Like, dude, what are you doing? Keep your cool, keep your composure. Guys miss kicks all the time. It's nothing new. There's no reason to lose your mind. Now, I know there was some other stuff that he was upset about throughout the season as well, and also on the sideline during that game. Just inexcusable. One thing I don't have on here is the defense didn't improve as much as it should have either. You see the stats there. Now, their offense was good enough to where it could win them 6 games, but their defense, in my opinion, lost them 4. So UCF, number 4. Number 3 is the defending national champions. Raise your hand if you thought LSU would fall off as much as they did this year. You raised your hand? You are lying to yourself. 5-5 was the record for LSU. Coming off a national title, they are the worst team. I think I have it in 3 reasons, so I'll tell you here in a little bit. Opt-outs and depleted roster was one of the big 3 reasons. Now, I know everyone had to deal with opt-outs. Everyone had to deal with injuries, and people are saying that's not an excuse on why you had a disappointing season. LSU had one of the worst case, especially in the depleted roster. You look at who they lost. God, where do I start? Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, among others. Those are just the 3 notable guys. They were going to have Jamar Chase coming back, but he opted out. Derek Stingley, I also believe, opted out. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. But LSU just depleted. And no star player emerged. Miles Brennan didn't fill in for Joe Burrow at all. And there was no filler anywhere at any position. It just didn't happen, especially in the wide receiver core, with Justin Jefferson being gone, Thaddeus Moss being gone, and Jamar Chase opting out. No one stepped up. And this is the worst record for a defending national champion. Need I say more? LSU was a disappointment this year. Their 3rd most disappointing team, in my opinion. Number 2 is the Michigan Wolverines. Giving Jim Harbaugh an extension. What this extension is people are like, why would you give Jim Harbaugh an extension? It's basically an extension spreading out his contract for longer so he gets less and less money. And if Michigan continues to be a disappointment, then they can buy him out for less and less money. It's one of those situations, probably didn't explain that well, but they went 2-4. The 2 wins, not against great teams, against Rutgers, and I believe no, they lost to Penn State. It was Rutgers and somebody else. Can't quite remember, but 2 wins, just not Michigan standard at all. Don Brown's defense got figured out. It is as simple as that. It was a Don Brown defense yet again, a very handsy, hard-on defense, and it got punished all year long. You can look at their stats there. It just got punished all year. And Joe Milton started out great. Everyone's like, Joe Milton, he's going to be really good. And then he wasn't so good. First 2 games for Joe Milton were really good. Really, really good. And then the last 4 were not. He fell off the face of the earth, pretty much. It was a great story. It was rising up. What happened? I couldn't answer that. I have no idea what happened to Joe Milton. He was great. Then he wasn't. I have penalties in all caps really big because it was important. Don Brown's defense, a lot of pass interference penalties, a lot of penalties late in the game. I don't think they were one of the more penalized teams in the nation, although they were on track to that if they would have played more games. But penalties. Big issue for the Wolverines this year. They are at number 2, but they were not the most disappointing team this year. Neither were they the most disappointing team in the Big Ten, because the number 1 disappointing team this year is the Penn State Nittany Lions. Now, I'm going to go ahead right now and say it. Opt-outs and injuries were a big reason. I know. First, you have Micah Parsons opt out. That is huge. Then you have Journey Brown go down with an injury, later find out he can't play football anymore. Then you have Noah Cain go down with an injury. And there was so many other things going on with Penn. It's just they had, in my opinion, the worst case of opt-outs and injuries that a team had this year. And it definitely contributed. You could see they were missing that leadership, missing that experience. You could just see it's part of the reason they went 4-5. But they were demoralized. The demoralized staff and players, especially with the news that Journey Brown was not going to be able to play anymore because of a heart condition, that is demoralizing. And the staff and players, again, with nothing going, everything opting out, just they were a demoralized team this year. And James Franklin had the worst season I've ever seen him coach. And that's saying a lot because he used to be the head coach at Vanderbilt. That's a Vanderbilt joke. Vanderbilt fans, don't at me. The two of you that there are. It's another joke. But poor coaching and play calling for Penn State and from James Franklin. The situation, how they handled the end of game at Indiana. If they would have bled off more clock, they probably could have won the game. And who knows what happens from there. Just poor coaching and play calling from James Franklin. This is the worst season I've seen him have in terms of his coaching and play calling. Penn State was the most disappointing team from 2020, 2021. And thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to leave a like, subscribe, hit the bell, comment down this video your top 10 of the most disappointing teams, and you can tell me what you thought about this video, and share the video with everyone you know. I'm trying to grow the channel as big as possible. Would mean a lot if you could share the video with people who like college football as much as you and me. Remember to play hard but tailgate harder. I will see all of you guys in the next one. Goodbye.